So in this video we'll look at floor switches that open doors when stepped on, doors that can only be opened when holding a key, and picking up and using different weapons. You should note that this tutorial uses variables. You need to think about where and when you initialize these variables to make sure they're not reset when you least expect. For example, as with scores, lives and health, if you initialize them on a create event on your player object, these are likely to be reset when you move between rooms. You might want to use a control object that only appears in the first room. For the first part of the video, you'll need sprites and objects for a non-movable wall that should be set to solid, two movable walls or doors also set to solid, a floor switch which is not solid, a key that is not solid, and a player that is not solid. All events that I'm going to go through are set up on the player object, and navigation will be standard left, right, up, down arrows. On the player object, create a collision event with a floor switch object. Add an action to destroy the instance, but remember to select the movable wall or the door as the object you want to destroy. On the player object, add a create event. Add the setVariable action and give the variable a sensible name. I've chosen var_key. It shows that it's a variable and it relates to the key. Set the value of it to 0. Set up a collision event between the player and the key. Add an action to set the variable var_key to 1. Essentially, we're using this as a Boolean flag. If the variable is set to 1, the player is holding the key. If it is set to 0, then they are not holding the key. Add an action to destroy the instance. Be sure that you destroy the key, as we want to give the impression that it has been picked up. Create a collision event with the door that is to be unlocked. In this case, we want to check if the player is holding the key. If they are, then the door can be opened. If not, then it must remain closed. Add an action to check a variable, and check if the variable var_key equals 1. If it does, then we want to destroy the instance of the door. In this section of the video I will cover picking up a weapon and setting the appropriate level of firepower, shooting a different bullet according to the weapon currently in use, and dropping a weapon. You will need sprites and objects for the player, the weapons and the bullets you will use. Your player sprite should contain at least 2 sub-images, one unarmed and the others carrying different weapons, depending obviously how many you want to use. There are slightly fancier things to add to the movement of the player, but I'll do that in another video. So we have the basic arrow controls. We will pick up a weapon by colliding with it. We will put it down again using the D key. Set up a collision event between the player and the smallest weapon. We're going to be using a variable called var_firepower. This will be used in 2 ways. The first is that it will tell us if the player is holding a weapon or not. The second is to tell us how powerful the weapon is. So the first task is to check if the variable var_firepower is set to 0. This means that the player is unarmed and is therefore able to pick up a weapon. We must then set the variable var_firepower to 1, as this is the smallest weapon. Change the player sprite to the subimage that shows the player holding the smallest weapon, then destroy the instance of the weapon they just picked up. Repeat this for the other weapons you have available. Create a collision between the player and the weapon, check if the player is unarmed, set the variable var_firepower to an appropriate value for that weapon, change the sprite to show the appropriate subimage, and destroy the instance of the weapon you just picked up. I've set up an event to shoot a bullet when the spacebar is pressed. Because the bullet will differ depending on the gun being held, we have to check the variable var_firepower. So we test to see if var_firepower is 1, and if it is, we create a moving instance of the smallest bullet. If var_firepower is 2, we create a moving instance of the bigger bullet. There are other tweaks we can make, and I'll go through this in another video. This could also be done in a script, which I'll also tackle further down the line. When the D key is pressed, I want to create an instance of the gun that the player is holding, as this will look like they've put it down. As with the bullet, we have to check the variable var_firepower, and use this to determine which gun instance to create. When we create the instance at x = 0, y = 0, we must make it relative so it appears where the player is positioned. I've also added a release key event for the D key that changes the sprite, the player sprite, back to the unarmed player sprite. I also set the variable var_firepower back to 0 to show that the player is unarmed. This works reasonably well in this format, although it is a little glitchy. I find that if you just press the D key and release it, the gun appears and then disappears again. In order to make the gun stay where I've put it, I have to start the player moving again whilst I'm still holding the D key. I've tried a few things to resolve this, but I haven't managed it yet, but it works well enough for our purposes.